Hello, good evening, and welcome to PM Express. Tonight we are talking about possibly the biggest subject that any Ghanaian would ever think about is fuel. There's a certain gentleman called Donald Trump sitting in the United States of America, wakes up one morning, decides to go to war with Iran in partnership with Israel. That single decision has led to prices of petroleum products across the world going up. In fact, as we talk right now, the global price of Brent crude is hovering above $100 a barrel. And this was 3 weeks ago, it was in the mid-60s, $65, $64 a barrel. That tells you the consequences that Donald Trump, Israel, have inflicted on the rest of the world. And we are bearing the brunt in this side of Africa, in West Africa, in this country called Ghana. And the man who has something to say about that, because it really sits at that a very important downstream sector where fuel prices, in essence, gets into your vehicle, gets into the stove in your house so you can cook food. He's a very important gentleman indeed, and I don't envy him because if you're chief executive of the NPA, you don't want to be living in these times when it's so unpredictable what is going to happen tomorrow. There was one time within 24 hours, the oil price moved from around 60, it went all the way to 120, $14, $15 a barrel. He's my guest on PM Express tonight. He is Godwin Eduji Tamaklo, Esquire. Great to have you.
Evans,
Great to have you.
it's been a while.
It's been a while.
You know, after I used to frequent your platform.
The hustle and bustle of the campaign, yes, I know.
But over a year now, I've been running away from that platform.
I know.
I mean, today you've taken the fight to me.
Yeah.
And let me say thank you so much for the opportunity to once again reach out to our people relative to a few things within the downstream. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. I've always maintained the things we do without the work of the media and people like you will become extremely difficult for us to carry the populace along. And so these engagements, I do not take it lightly at all. And I want to believe that after this program, we'll be able to meet some of the expectations of our people. I mean,
good to have you on the show. And I believe for most Ghanaians, it's the best time to hear from you because of what everybody else is concerned about. Let's start with that intro I did with the decision by United States of America, Donald Trump, and Russia and Israel to go to war with Iran. When you had that decision, and I'm imagining a young chief executive officer taking the helm, it's just been a year. Yeah. Fuel has been one of the best performing things on this economy in the last 1 year, primarily because the city is doing so well, and so it's mitigated part of the impact. It even encouraged government to put one cedi on fuel price, and it didn't make any hit, right? And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and Trump is going to war in the Middle East. Yeah. I wonder that morning when you woke up and you checked, I'm pretty sure there's a way you check your pricing every day, right? When you checked that, you were briefed. What was the reaction? What was the immediate reaction?
So, Evans, I can tell you that in this role, I think one of the things that I've always prayed against is any of these geopolitical conversations that have impact on pricing of particularly, like you said, crude. And I remember last year, around June, when Israel and the US launched the 12-day war. I went through a similar situation. However, because that one just lasted for 12 days, the impact wasn't that much. And, immediately, even though Iran threatened the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, what happened was that because Kuwait, Oman are on the other side of the straits, they also came out and said, look, they are not going to allow a unilateral closure. Then came the extraction of Nicolas Maduro, and that one too, the impact was not so heavy, because remember that Venezuela does so well with crude production. I think he has one of the world's largest or so proven crude reserves. And so these geopolitical issues are always a huge matter for us within this, principally because you notice that and currently we have about 30 to 40% of our national consumption coming from local refineries. Thermal Oil Refinery and Centu. There are two modular refineries that do about 6,000, 5,000 barrels of crude. But those are very small, refineries. And so 60% is still dependent on imported products. And so anytime pricing, in terms of price of crude, or anything that can impact on it, it becomes a huge thing. In this country, there are two principal determinants of pricing: the Forex and the FOB. Now, you notice that the FOB pricing of petroleum products is obviously dependent on the price of crude. Thankfully, within the period, we've had crude hover maximum for the past 13 months. It's been $74.
Yeah.
And then it got stabilized around 66, 67, which was quite good. So with a better performing cedi, it helps out to mitigate the overall impact on the pricing to domestic users of petroleum products. Now, what has become the situation now is that crude prices have risen from 66 by Saturday 28th, to the position where today we are looking at crude doing almost 105.
Yeah.
With 105, what is also happening is that obviously we have a platform where we check the price, and the prices are daily. They move every day. And so I have a very solid technical team monitoring the pricing at any point in time. And so that within the window, we'll strike an average. And that's what we use in doing our computations. Yeah. So once we look at the window throughout the period where the bombings are going on within the region, we realize a particular number. And when we did our computation, it is what is reflecting at the various pumps. Thankfully, the current managers of the economy, the Honorable Ato Forson, Governor Esiama, and co, have basically worked together in getting the Ghana cedi relatively stable, and that stability had resulted. In fact, the record will show that but for the fact that the cedi had been relatively stable, petroleum pricing should be within 19 to 20 Ghana cedis.
That's for petrol?
Yeah, for diesel.
For diesel.
The pricing relative to the cedi component is what has mitigated the impact. The impact would have been a bit bigger, but for the stability. And I'll give you a classic example. If you notice, around November, right? I think November 4th, November 5th, 6th, 2024, the Ghana cedi traded around 17.2 Ghana cedis. So you needed 17.2 Ghana cedi to $1. And this was just November 2024. At that time, crude sold around $70, $71, $74 per barrel. Now, even at that time, even when, the crude was almost 70, because the Ghana cedi went to that level, petroleum prices sold between 15 Ghana cedis for a liter. That should tell you that you can have a situation where crude prices may be relatively, okay. But if you are not able to hold, carefully the Forex, its impact is bigger.
So our saving grace is the strong
Ghana
performance
cedi.
of the cedi.
For now, But for that, it would have been a disaster. Would have been, and that is why I personally, at a personal level, I want to salute the managers of the economy for putting the Ghana cedi relatively stable for the purposes of planning. That is what has given us the saving grace. Remember that, and I remember around November 2022, we're selling a liter of diesel for 23 Ghana cedis in this country before, and the record is there. Why? At that time, crude prices were relatively okay. But that was the time there were uncertainties whether we're going to have a good deal with the IMF. Because remember that we have engaged in the IMF conversation by the 1st of July 2022. As at November, we're still trying to put together a staff agreement with the IMF. So there was so much uncertainty. So it took a liter of diesel for 23 Ghana cedis. By Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, we still have the same situation. What has changed is the Ghana cedi. Unfortunately, now the pricing for crude. And obviously, we know where the impact is coming from. But I'm very confident that this is not going to be a prolonged war.
And that is the thing. We'll come to that because the prediction, even Trump doesn't know exactly when he's pulling.
But I'm very confident.
You're confident. I'll try and interrogate what's the source of that confidence.
That confidence, yeah.
Let's come to a few things you've done in the last few days that some have raised questions with. One is the fuel price discount that you discontinued. Why?
Okay, so first of all, I think the conversation has not been properly framed. We have said that in 2012, an airline was passed, which airline regulates how pricing is done in the country, so that it doesn't become free for all. Now, that particular airline, which is the National Petroleum Authority pricing regulation, I think LI 2826 or so, what it did at that time was to effectively control the pricing to say that it should be uniform pricing. Now, in 2015, that LI was amended. So Regulation C, Regulation 1, and usually for lawyers we say Sub-Regulation C of Regulation 1. What it did was to amend the previous Sub-Regulation C by introducing a different clause. Which clause is that whatever price you are selling the product, if you are an OMC, it should be the price throughout your outlets. Now, so previously, what industry players were doing is that, and I do not want to mention any particular OMC, so you can have Evans & Co. Limited as the name OMC. They have about 30 outlets. They will select the outlets in the most populous areas and say that in this place, I'm giving a discount. The same OMC will now say, I have a general price. That general price, price apply to every other person. But in these selected stations in the most populous areas, I will not. Now, for us in the authority, our primary responsibility is to ensure fair competition, fair trade. I am not in the mind of a businessman. Businessmen will do anything to maximize maybe either the quantity sold or anything. But I'm in for everybody. So the businessman and the consumer and the industry itself. You need to protect the industry itself. And that's why there's regulation. Now you see, in market structures, usually, there's something called predatory pricing. So a very strong company can use pricing to kill other competitors. And once they establish themselves, more like a monopoly, they begin to increase their price.
But you must allow market forces to determine who survives and who dies.
There's a reason why you have a government. Even in Thomas Hobbes' writing, The Leviathan, there's a reason why we left the state of nature and called for ourselves centralized government. We would have asked everybody to work out. We'll get to a point where might becomes right. But once might becomes right, the weak, what will happen to them? So governments exist for a reason. And that is why you have regulation. And so what the LI did was for us to reinforce the LI. In fact, we've not done anything new.
Remember, so this is an LI that predated your...
No, in fact, it's a 2015 LI. And the way the downstream is so powerful. If you do anything illegal, they'll take you to court. And I'll tell you a story. I remember in my previous life, my law firm used to represent the authority many years ago. I think that should be 2013 to 2016. And so then, Association of Oil Marketing Company, before it became COMAC, anytime the authority takes a decision that they were always in court. And I remember vividly, their lawyer was my respected senior, Professor Kofi Abochi. And so he will issue a rate, apply for injunction, and then I will be on the other side representing the authority. So the industry said that if you try anything that is unlawful, they will challenge you. You've noticed that from the time we came out with this directive, there have not been any challenge.
But some have publicly criticized you. Have seen Star Oil allow for price discounting across various stations.
So, I've had to engage my brother, Peter,
the chief executive of Star Oil.
Yeah. Philip, very excellent, brilliant guy, great business model. I had to engage him that I've seen that this is what you're doing, but this is what the law says. And I remember I had a very interactive meeting with him. We look at all the models, you understand? And again, the industry. I had to also call the entire COMAC members and say, look, this is the law. Let's play by the rules. Because you see, once you are given a license by the states, there are rules of engagement which require that you must play by the rules.
Yeah, let me
at a personal level, I would have wished that you discount.
Yeah, I was coming to ask the same
question.
So
I'm coming there.
I mean, you are a customer.
I'm coming there.
I am going to a filling station that is giving me a discount.
I remember saying this.
Why is the state trying to?
I remember saying that. Look, at a personal level, I'm loving what is going on. I mean, to see competition beat the price even to the barest minimum. I'll love it. But you see, law exists for the purpose of balance. So it's a balancing act.
How does the law protect the consumer? You made the argument about the industry.
Yeah.
But what about the consumer? This principle, this law that you're enforcing, that it must be uniform across. How does that protect me? My interest?
You see, in life, you can have short-term benefits and long-term harm. You need to always protect, not only today, but also tomorrow. I gave you a classic example where, through predatory pricing, you can kill off competitors. Now, once you kill them with low price and they are all dead, it's left with only you. Now you start increasing the price. There wouldn't be any competitor. That is when you begin to feel the impact that, what has happened? And the interesting thing is that oftentimes the market is ahead of the regulator. Markets often are ahead of regulation. That's what a lot of people do not. So you see that oftentimes Parliament goes to pass a law after the thing had happened, or to cure a mischief. That is not prospective. But this particular LI, which is the 2015 LI, is seen into time to say that no, if you don't manage it well, and you end up having a very dominant one company, a time will come that there will be no competitor, only one giant. And whatever it does, you can't even stop it.
So that piece of
I'll give you a classic
monopolistic
example. I'll give you a classic example in a different
regime.
Our telecommunication industry. There's something happening in our telecommunication company.
I mean, governments have tried to legislation to try and control that and enhance competition.
Not even that, Evans, not even that. Even more importantly, almost all the smaller telcos are aware.
Yeah.
There's only a giant that now government is now trying to control all over the world. There are anti-competition rules.
So this is one of those.
This is one.
Related to that is the price floor policy. You have a price floor. Are you going to scrap the price floor?
No.
Why? Especially in these uncertain times.
So what has happened is I took over the authority, and one of the policy directive or initiative I realized was the issue of the price floor. And I called my directors. We interrogated the issues, the underlying philosophy behind it. So I called the oil marketing companies, COMAC, to a meeting to engage further on the price floor mechanism. And it was an industry-specific engagement that resulted in the introduction of the price floor. And I'll tell you, when you speak to the wider industry, all of them are for it. There's enormous.
All?
When I say
some
all,
are not.
No,
I mean,
when I say all, I'm saying that it's an association. So when out of 10, maybe 1 says no, there's a 9 that says yes.
But that one is the big boy in the room. Market share, dominant. He's the number 1.
Usually
you have to weight it.
Usually, I do
differently.
not want to reduce the conversation where it becomes ad hominem.
Yeah.
In the sense that it is about someone. No. I have an industry to protect. You see, I always use this example that one big tree doesn't make a forest. Right? One big tree doesn't make a forest. You need the shrubs, everything to make up that forest. So when you are the forestry commissioner and you focus on only, maybe say, the mahogany tree alone at the expense of the others, you wake up one morning, there's only one mahogany tree standing, no other thing around it. As the forestry commissioner, would you have the courage to call the mahogany tree standing as a forest? You won't do that. And so where you have, like the situation where I find myself, I should look beyond just that big tree and look at the forest and how to preserve it. And I have that responsibility to ensure that we protect the forest.
What about in these? So this is a policy that has been implemented.
Obviously predates me.
Yeah, except that we are in very uncertain times.
Yeah.
At least in the last 5 years, we've not had oil cross $100 a barrel. It has crossed $100 a barrel. So circumstances have changed. Shouldn't we be reconsidering that,
now,
at least in the interim?
Let me say this. Thankfully, I have a sector minister who is extremely proactive. And so from the time, I think the Saturday when this happened, obviously I had to brief national security about a few issues to secure 1 or 2 things first. And once we got there, the next thing is to look at the pricing and what we have to do. At that time, we had the benefit because we've locked down the first window. So it wasn't much of a problem. a second window. Now, with this second window, what we have decided to do is to look at the mechanisms or the things that are pushing the prices up and give ourselves this window to run the various simulations. Thankfully, under the guidance and the direction of my minister, the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapor, what we have done is to ask all the industry players from Seaboard, COMAC, and all the people who matter. In fact, in a meeting where I was present, from GMPC, from whoever, all of us by the table, to brainstorm on the way forward. Two things are of great concern: supply reliability and pricing. It appears we secured the issues of supply reliability.
Give us the specifics.
How many? I'll come there. Then the next one had to do with pricing. It's the pricing that the conversation is, why is it that at this point we cannot, take the floor price? When do you introduce it again? It's a legislation, it's an ally. Do I have the power on my own accord to suspend the implementation of an ally that had gone through the 21 gestation period in Parliament? I think my powers and my pay grade is a bit below doing that. But we are engaging. In fact, even this morning, I was again with my minister. We are looking at different options, focus on making life easier for the Ghanaians.
So that's a very important one. I asked the question about the 2 points you made about securing supply and then pricing. You said you'll come to the supply base, so I'll wait for that. But let's expand on that. I guess that is the biggest worry for many people. That is why you're spending, I guess, most of your time meeting on exploring the options. What are the options on the table?
There are so many options that we looked at. One, because we looked at principally the influence of forex. So one of the things that we're looking at, is it possible we can have some dedicated forex for only the BDCs?
So you have a fixed rate for them
for the BDCs. But that has an immediate pushback. Okay. So I've engaged the governor of Bank of Ghana, the respected Dr. Esiama, and the finance minister on those matters. The only challenge is that the IMF has a problem with multiple, they call it multiple currencies, where within a country you have different, forex for different transactions. The IMF is not comfortable with that. But we're still looking at all the options involved in it. The other one is the suggestion that you've also
reduce the
if we can not a scrap,
suspend.
I won't call it suspension, but how do you proceed with the issue of the floor price? And then the things that goes into rates to come to that level. I mean, the OMCs and everybody, what goes even into their margins. At the BDC side, we are also looking at, the conversation, maybe to interrogate. If they are selling a metric ton for X amount, what goes into it? Can we interrogate it?
So you're looking at margins now?
I won't call it margins. There are premiums that are paid when you bring the product in. Some call suppliers premium and all of those things. Can we interrogate the numbers? What is going into it? If on every metric ton you are doing a supplier's premium of, say, $50, what is going into it? Can it be 40? Can it be 45? Then it means that there is a $50 reduction. So there are so many options on the table for now.
Are you considering suspending, scrapping some of the taxes. You know, as you know, taxes all combined come down to, my last calculations, 4 cedis or so on a litre. Two of them that readily come to mind is price stabilization levy. Some have said possibly must go now. And then that 1 cedi that was put on last year when things were very rosy with the cedi. Is that conversation on the table?
Okay, so if you note, the budget was read in November. And when the budget was read, government gave an indication that this year, in terms of domestic revenue mobilization, government is looking at about 250 billion Ghana cedis to ramp up domestic. And then government has already put out what its expenditure for the year is going to be, about 300 and something. So already, even what is raised internally may not meet exactly what, or the expenditure baskets. But let me say that the two taxes that you've given an indication, the price stabilization, is anchored under EXLA. And remember that we've escrowed the EXLA receivables under EXLA PLC. And their commitment, because of the bonds that we raise based on the assurance of those receivables, we still have commitments on those ones. And so it is not a conversation that you can simply say is binary, yes or no. You scrap or you not. You need to weigh, possibly with the benefit of time. So we will need to give ourselves this 2 weeks window and see, first of all, what is the outlook like in terms of even the war itself. And let me run this scenario with you. If the war continues, but the situation normalizes, because usually what increases the price is the insurance, the freight costs, and others. That is really, that messes up the crude pricing. Insurance, because obviously we know the theater. If ships are to pass there and it is now more expensive to pass or risky to pass, then, and in fact, one of the infographics that I looked at, you could pay $250,000 of insurance premium on a vessel. Now it has increased from $250,000 to $500,000. What it means that it has increased. It will pass on to the crude price. Now, if you have all those scenarios playing, it will get to a point where it can normalize. So you can see Russia-Ukraine war has not ended, but things have normalized. You understand? So you can have the war even continue for the next, God knows, 6 months. But things will normalize to the point that maybe it will get to 90, it won't go up, it won't go down. Then you can run the numbers here in Ghana and say, okay, if you run, what will be the worst case scenario for you in terms of crude? What is it that can impact on inflation? What is it that can impact on the other indicators? If you can run the economy, worst case $90, and still keep inflation under check and others, I'm sure the finance minister and the other superiors who advise government on some of these things will take a bold decision, and we are to comply with it.
But in these conversations, have the taxes come up at all?
These are conversations that would always be had in the room.
Because that 1 cedi one is something that you introduce, your government introduced, so you are in full control of that. And if circumstances...
Every other tax, I should think
government is in control. But I'm saying because of the NDC, a lot of them predated you. Some of them were subject to criticism by NDC folks before you came to power. But this one is something introduced. And I guess it was introduced...
EXLA is President Mohammed's baby.
Baby, yes.
The initial thing was that it was just going to be for 5 years, if you recall. The 2015 EXLA Act was supposed to be just for 5 years. Unfortunately or fortunately, because EXLA PLC was incorporated and the receivables were used for the bonds, it has to have a higher tenor, extended tenor now. Now it's infinitum, you understand? So if you have that situation, initially, I recall the previous ESLA Act, the price stabilization component was, if you read the initial act, the 2015 act, it says in times of economic uncertainties, what have been saved will be used to mitigate. But it does appear that because of all the commitments founded on ESLA by reason of the PLC, you are going to have a situation where the funds may be commingled. And so isolating specifics. Do
we have anything there to cushion? Because that was the original purpose.
No, that's what I'm saying, that you can have a situation where because we had to do the DDPs and all those matters, you can commingle the funds. So it becomes difficult to say, I am isolating price stabilization standalone for the purposes of taking it away.
I mean, so a lot is riding on when the war ends and its long-term impact on crude. That is an area that nobody can predict right now. You remain very, very confident that the war will end soon. But what's the basis of that confidence?
You see, the reason why I say I'm very confident that things will happen, you see, whatever is happening, the impact is being felt globally. The International Energy Agency, just last week, had to do an emergency meeting where 400 million barrels of crude had to be moved into the market.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented. The US alone had to release about 172 million barrels. Japan, South Korea did about 22 million barrels. All of them are put in the back. They need to restock. You can't restock at a higher price. So usually what the dynamics is that when you move about 400 million barrels out, you want to buy it cheaper and store it again for bad time. You can't go and buy it at 100 and store. You need to get it to 60, 50, 40 thereabout and build up your reserve. And so the people who matter, this thing is beginning to impact on them as well. Two, as we speak, the Iranians are, with their permission, you are able to use the Strait of Hormuz.
Except you are a tanker originating from the US or
exactly.
Or from Israel.
Exactly. So that's the point I'm making, that even within the war, there are stands that are beginning to appear softened. Iran itself needs money to run the war. Because war itself is expensive. If America in 17, 18 days has spent in excess of $7-8 billion on this war, it's not an endless budget. You also need to build, you need to have the financial muscle. So the Iranian government and all the Gulf regions needs stability for the growth of the region itself. And so there's a strong push. Also, America has a midterm election coming up in November. Much earlier, President Donald Trump had made it abundantly clear that Democrats taking the two houses, Senate and Congress, in November, there's a high risk of him being impeached. Inflation is not anything a president wants going into an election in the U.S.
And already gas costs in the U.S. has gone up by 50 cents
Absolutely. It's almost +2.
Yeah, what it used to be 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. So that alone has a cascading ripple effect on the inflationary pressure even in the United States of America. And so there's going to be a global coalition of reason where reasonable people will say, okay, for whatever it's worth, you want regime change. It may not be a Nicolas Maduro situation. Why not allow for maybe a partial ceasefire? Maybe all of us can conventionally agree that we should allow for passage, because already my last check indicates that Pakistan could move their products through a vessel named Karachi through the Strait of Hormuz, because the product was purchased in Chinese yuan. You understand? The Iranians allowed passage. Then there's also this conversation that once you are buying the product and you are buying it in Chinese yuan, you'll be allowed passage. India is also passing through, getting product passed through. If you pick this country, with the exception of South Korea and Japan, these are the major takers of products from the Strait of Hormuz. So in terms of the global crude that passes through them, a lot is, the dynamics is changing with the benefit of time.
So that's the source of your confidence.
So, I mean, from where it is, there are too many situations that do not make an extended conflict.
And then look, why you do the estimation?
In fact, I read somewhere where somebody said, it looks like the conflict will create a regime change faster in the US than Iran.
And why you do that analysis, you must also think about worst case scenario.
No, in fact, that is why, if you look at my previous...
In the worst case scenario...
If you look at my previous, there are conversations that I cannot disclose, where we have even done simulations. What will be the impact if it goes to 120, 145? That kind of scenarios we've done, but at least for now...
And we have prescribed solutions when
we've looked at all scenarios
that will be triggered.
We've looked at all scenarios,
which is the basis of the consideration of all the other factors.
We've looked
taxes,
at everything has been looked at. Everything has been looked at.
So that's the chief executive of the NPA. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I'm pretty sure you've noticed that the costs of fuel have gone up at the pumps on the 16th. This is just yesterday. I'm going to ask him specifically about that, because that is how we talk about the global geopolitics of this, and oil above $100. But it's now in cities now, the pumps, as you see. Some of them, as today I noticed, one of the OMCs is selling it diesel up around 16.90 thereabout, and then you have petrol around 13 thereabout. Some, of course, are competing. I've seen that, and I need to mention that because they are the state-owned OMC, and this oil is dropped again today. I've seen their posts. So there's some competition there, but that means something for you. Thankfully, the main trigger for mass effect and mass impact is fares. GPLTU says yesterday that they met and they said they're not going to touch transport fares. So that, I guess, will give Eduji and the finance minister some moments respite. But how is he dealing with the cost that has gone up in this window? What is his expectation of the next pricing window, for example? And then his opponents in the minority, they've been speaking about what they shouldn't do, and maybe they should be eating humble pie in this particular circumstance. I'll put that to him too. And I'll talk about the main big challenge for me, the big picture, strategic reserves. He's talked about 400 million barrels being released by the Western countries. And trust me, it is not charity. It is strategic. If you have oil prices at $100 and you release a strategic reserve, you are selling at $100 a barrel. So you're making money. And that's what his point is making, that if you want to buy to restock, then you want to buy lower. So what is Ghana's strategic reserve? I mean, how are we doing there? I'll ask him his thoughts on this. A lot on this here on PM Express after this break. We are still live on PM Express, and my guest is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Petroleum Authority, the NPA. Is Godwin Eduji. We are talking about the big subject of fuel prices at the pump in the wake of the war on Iran waged by the US and Israel. And on Monday, we saw that this latest pricing window had seen some increases in the price of petroleum products at the pumps. There's competition, you see that. I mean, the lower end of it, you see particularly two OMCs fighting it out there. Gol is in that fight with Star, and then you also have the upper end. You have others like, the Total and Shell also fighting at the upper end. But whatever it is a consumer at the heart of this that is worried the most. Now, your opponents in the NPP have had a few things to say since this happened yesterday. Alexander Fenyo says, if indeed we have sufficient buffers, we don't expect any increase in fuel price. In Akufo-Addo's era, you said the Ukraine-Russia war should not have any effect on Ghana. Is the NDC, and I know you were a chief communicator in the lead up to the campaign, ready to eat humble pie yet? Because the bombs have been dropped in Iran, in Israel, and the surrounding nations, but the impact is being felt in the pockets of Ghanaians here, which is the same as Ukraine.
Usually I say that at least if you cannot be truthful, at least be accurate. I always say that. What exactly did President Mahama say whilst in opposition? He has been a very consistent communicator on government, the trajectory of this country. I grew up in situations where I saw ministers of finance declare or announce the price of petroleum products. Petrol has always been part of Ghana's politics. I saw in the year 2000 the likes of Evans Mensah holding gallons of petrol on the campaign platform and say, petrol no mutimito ana, then the people will say, there be. Then that's a whole conversation. It has always been part of our politics. I remember after COVID-19 and the 2020 election, President Mahama went to Harvard University and did a lecture there. And in that lecture, President Mahama made it very clear. He said, look, COVID-19 has ravaged the global economy. That's an admission that COVID, in fact, impacted on the global economy. He provided a caveat. He said, in the specific case of Ghana, in the specific case of Ghana, what happened was that the year 2020 was an election year. And so we spent beyond our means by 15%. That was the budget deficit. And he said that budget deficit was unique to Ghana, notwithstanding the fact that Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, because they didn't have election for the year 2020, they posted lower budget deficit. So President Mahama situated the conversation rightly. Today, our friends in the NPP have decided to twist what he said there to create an impression that President Mahama said Ukraine is far from Ghana, and for that matter, it wasn't having any impact. Far from that. He provided context to the conversation. So there's nothing like a humble pie. It has always been the NDC politics from generation that exogenous factors always impact on the economy. In the year 1999,
communicators like Felix and Co, and the clip has been shared recently. It says even the Ukraine that is feeling the impact of the direct bombs are not having the same inflation as what we're having.
No,
in Ghana.
because at the time, inflation went to 54%.
Yeah.
When inflation went to 54%, what was the inflation rate in Ukraine, where the bombs were dropping? In fact, in the whole of Africa south of the Sahara, there were only two countries that Ghana's inflation was much better than. Do you know the two countries?
Tell me.
South Sudan and Zimbabwe. That was how dubious our record was. That we were in the league of chasing inflation with Zimbabwe and South Sudan. The two are different. And you see, we need to put context to the Russia-Ukraine war. Has the war ended?
It hasn't.
So for the past 13 months, that we were selling petrol, diesel, lower than any time that we inherited. Why was it? Because in the midst of Russia-Ukraine war, by November 1st, 2022, How much were we trading the Ghana cedi for, Richard Evans? In fact, 4th November 2024, that's barely a year or two ago, the Ghana cedi traded 17 Ghana cedis, 17.20 Ghana cedi to $1. What is the rate today? So even if crude is $70 and you are selling it at an exchange, or you are buying it at an exchange rate of 17.2, would you have the same pump price? Clearly, the management of the economy has a great impact on pricing. That is what our friends in the NPP do not want to admit. You know, in the law of thought, there's something we call but for. But for this conflict, how much were you buying petroleum price? How should this know? How is it difficult for anybody?
They made the same argument, like for the Ukraine.
No.
And then you have to throw in the pandemic.
No, I'm saying that. Had the
inflation would not have been 50%.
Had the Ukraine war ended, had the Ukraine war ended.
But its impact on fuel pricing
which
has been
impact?
blunted.
No, which impact? Supplanted by what? In fact, for a long time, the big countries have stopped and put sanctions on Russia. It is just even recently that Russian oil is even moving into China, so it's even a better scenario now. So that is why we want to make the point. I mean, for me, the politics, we can play it. We have a situation, we have leadership. What the ordinary Ghanaian today is asking for are two things: product availability and pricing. If, assuming the price even goes high, he wants a firm assurance that my government, do you have enough product in the country that I will not have to queue at the pump? The firm assurance is yes, we have. In fact, our available record shows that for the next 7 weeks, we have enough diesel in the country. As I speak to you, at the CBM, there's a vessel discharging now.
Petrol?
Diesel.
Okay.
We have 4 more vessels at Anchorage waiting to discharge more into the system. So clearly, in terms of product security, product availability, I want to assure our people that there's a firm grip on that one.
So the diesel, you have up to 4 weeks of cover.
In fact, now from what we have now, extended to almost 7.
Extended to almost 7
weeks
weeks of cover. What about
petrol? Is doing 6.
6 weeks of cover. And the stocks that we currently have, though, it is held by the bulk
the BDCs.
The BDCs hold that stock. So that stock is not what Boss is in.
Oh, Boss has its own stocks, but the majority obviously is privately.
But isn't there the risk there that is the private sector that is holding that stock and not government strategic stock?
So I'll tell you something. The day the bombing started, I think it was a Saturday morning. Yeah. So once again, usually as a young man in this office, I once in a while reach out to the elders who have managed this sector. So I remember speaking to the respected, the distinguished, obviously, the man who has Ghana's energy blueprint, the Honorable, I'm sure ordinarily I'll call him a guru, Mr. John Atuawoy. On Saturday I had a conversation, and he kind of gave me the history behind the setting up of BOST, and how he discussed the BOST conversation with President Rawlings, may he so rest in peace, and how he agreed to that intervention for it to be a strategic stock for the country. But over the period, the dynamics of the industry have changed the outlook of BOST. more into a trading company. You understand? And so the straight conversation that boss just be a passive holder of our reserve, the dynamics has a bit changed. We may want to revisit that conversation.
Should we?
Why not?
Under your watch?
In fact, I'll tell you something. I've engaged my brother, very distinguished young man like myself, Afechi Awuno, of Bost, that even if you look at our tankage, it appears too southern. All the strategic storage facilities are very southern. We need to begin to have a conversation into the middle belt. Boss has a lot of land within the Kumasi enclave. So we may have to build more tanks in Kumasi. The Western Corridor, Western region, right to Western North, we need to also increase our tankage. You don't do that because possibly they are commercially viable today. You're doing it for the sake of tomorrow. That, in my interaction with affected Atuaho, is the vision. It's the sense I got in that conversation.
So as you speak, currently, Boss doesn't hold any strategic reserve.
I won't say they don't. They have products. But it may not necessarily be for strategic reserve purposes. But Boss has his, his own products.
But you concede that what we need to be pushing for is for the strategic reserve to be with the state and not with private entities.
So you say, I use this scenario. You know the mother hen?
Yeah.
In our village setting, we would have to sit maybe on the egg for 30 days. Then it will hatch. There are two schools of thought. That should be the position of Bost. Just sit on the reserve and leave it like that. Don't go into trading. The others who are of the video or the view that no, maybe you can trade 70% of what you have. Keep 30% for the purposes of a reserve in terms of the situations that we have. So that when the private person, you can bring your product because you bought it at a cheaper rate. Once you pump it into the system, even at maybe say 14, not maybe the numbers that we're saying, one, you make profit because you bought it cheaper, and the other. So these are all scenarios that we're looking at. But I agree perfectly with any conversation that says, let's build a reserve. The ants, we are told from the Bible, in good time builds hay, right? In good times, it builds hay. That's what we're told from the Bible. And so there's wisdom, even biblically, to build a reserve. Today, the world is benefiting from reserves that have been built by other countries by way of crude. So conventionally, there's nothing wrong with that wisdom.
Can you technically call the up to 7 weeks of cover for diesel, up to 6 weeks of cover for petrol, strategic national reserves? Considering that it is private sector that is holding that
at the level
reserve.
At the level of regulation, okay. So once you are given a license, that's the states giving you a guarantee to undertake a particular trade. Would you want to use that guarantee the states to work against the states? It's not a conversation we should even have. The state has a lot of powers. In extreme circumstances, everything belongs to the states.
But you see the risk there.
There's no risk.
Also because
you see,
private business can tend to be greedy. If what is happening in the Middle East doesn't end,
even those who have released the 400 million barrels, at the core of it may be greed.
of course, because the
Take
prices,
advantage.
the prices are very, very high
So
now.
they are not Father Christmas.
They had pitched it as if this is...
So they are not Father
the rest of
Christmas.
the
So
world.
you can't have a situation, because even if government tomorrow decides to release it into the market, we'll be selling it.
Yeah.
Assuming we have the reason.
True.
We'll be selling it.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit higher than the price it was purchased, but to mitigate the impact of this shock. So it is not, for me, a win or a zero-sum game.
Yeah. But what you say is actually what makes this so dangerous.
Yes.
Because of the private man's propensity for greed, right? And so,
but you see,
and it's why this, I guess, should be an urgent issue to tackle.
You say, I won't describe it as greed. Profit motivation is firmly a guarantee for enterprise. You understand? Profit is a guarantee for enterprise. Without profit, nobody enters, will go into the arena.
And they can squeeze us all because of that profit.
You see, so I'll tell you something. There was an experience in 2015 where there was a conversation about the states owing the BDCs, the foreign differential losses, and all those things. We woke up one morning and, there was queues at the stations, I think 2015 thereabout. But there was product in country. Now, I think there's a certain good conversation between the private people and the state in terms of how we proceed, because it comes with its own risk. If the license the state has given you, because remember, you can't bring a liter of petroleum product into this country without the benefit of a license. So if that license is given to you to bring that product, and you use that license to sabotage the state, in the past they used to call it economic saboteurs. Yeah. You remember? Yeah. Why would you want to have that conversation?
But you are, through this, making the point indirectly, if I'm a BDC, that the government is not going to allow that. Anybody to, in this current contest.
Obanyansafoɔ. Yebunube. Yenkanasem.
Afenyo Marking says government must subsidize in the wake of the recent increases and the anticipated next window. Would you subsidize?
I have a great deal of respect for my learned senior, Osahene Alex Afenyo Marking. Sometimes the views and the solution he prescribes usually appear like great gifts. You know great gifts?
Tell me.
And so you need to handle his suggestions with a bit of circumspection, with the greatest respect to him. I remember when the cocoa crisis or whatever started, one of his prescriptions, or the people he leads, their prescription was that government should go and borrow to give to cocoa farmers. And so you borrow, you give cocoa farmers, and the poultry farmers are waiting for you. The maize farmers are waiting for you. Cashew farmers are waiting for you. And so usually the Afenyo Marking formulations must always be taken with a lot of circumspection. And I have a great deal of respect, and he knows my great admiration for him. But I want to treat his solutions with a bit of caution.
So no subsidy?
With a bit of caution.
Speaking about subsidy, he's speaking about the general concept of government cushioning the consumer. So let's tackle that. Sri Lanka.
So hold on. Mm-hmm. When we say government
cushioning,
so like Afenyo Marking scenario.
Yeah. He says
his
solution is subsidized.
So November, the dollar was 17.
November 2024, you mean?
Yes, 17.2. And in fact, I just checked CTFM online by a story. $17.2 to a cedi. If today we had left the Ghana cedi at 17.20, with petrol, crude going to 105, we'll be selling a liter for 24 Ghana cedis. what more subsidy can there be
So
than
this is-
sound management?
So this is sound
No, and I'm
management.
just saying that a sound manager of the economy, even by keeping the Ghana cedi well and firm.
Sound manager subsidy, that's what you're calling it.
I want to, but again, I mean, all these scenarios will be looked at.
So he makes that general point. And if you position within the global context in the last, say, 48 hours,
Yeah.
several countries are now
I've
already
seen-
moving
I've
into
seen-
that.
I've
Sri
seen-
Lanka is declared Wednesday
I've
off for
seen it.
workers to
I've seen it.
conserve fuel.
I've seen
Thailand
it.
has said
In fact,
they will
Kenya,
require more.
Kenya, you know,
yeah.
for
Even now
this,
the maximum petroleum price in Kenya will remain unchanged.
in fact,
March
I've been
15
looking at the Kenyans. In fact,
Yeah.
they had.
When are we going to do any of this?
So they had a press briefing, and in the press briefing, I was monitoring because it was more or less online, like a Zoom, so I could, you know, and thank once again Energy News. That's a very good online platform that's energy-related issues. So I had the benefit of seeing the Kenyan on their portal, and I followed the conversation. I think the Kenyan dynamics is a bit more different. It's a bit more different. We are looking at the Ghanaian scenario. I do not know how much, is it a kwacha or something, the Kenyan currency.
Yeah.
How much is trading for $1, the dynamics, you may not, you know. So there are too many things that are a bit more different if you look at Ghana, Kenya. And that would impact on the decision that the respective governments are taking. If from now to the end of, say, April, we keep the dollar at 10.7, right into April and beyond, it would absorb much of the impact.
You know
that
the
will
element
become.
there that Kenya and all that are kind of taking away certainty. You say if, but in Kenya they have certainty now. March 15, April 14.
No, that's what I'm saying.
predictability.
Do you know the exchange dynamics in Kenya?
It may be different from us.
That is what I'm saying, that policy...
but consumers
listen,
want some certainty.
No, policy formulation is founded on internal, unique dynamics. And so it becomes difficult to draw a comparison without the benefit of those dynamics, which may be completely unique from Ghana.
Our dynamic, let's look at our dynamic
Again,
currently.
we are doing
Prices
40,
have gone up
so
yesterday.
we are doing 40%. Private, a state refinery, a private refinery, Central Toll, together with the two modular, they are doing these numbers. You also have a situation where 60% is dependent on imported products. You understand? What may be the situation in Kenya? I do not have that exclusive information. And so it becomes difficult for me, sitting here, to just draw that comparison and what exactly is informing that decision.
But if we speak just about our circumstance,
Yeah.
prices went up yesterday.
Yeah.
Is there any certainty as far as prices is concerned for the Ghanaian consumer that government, your agency can guarantee? I mean, UK Prime Minister, just as they're watching the address of the nation, announced a 15 million support package to help poor households because of the anticipation that this is going to send cost of living going up. What is the guarantee that we're giving to our consumers about price certainty going forward? I guess that is the basic principle around these countries' interventions.
Again, like I said, some of these decisions requires broader conversation, possibly ministerial or presidential level. What we have is this window to study how the market will react generally.
Okay.
That will inform some of the decisions if this becomes more extended.
Okay.
That one, I know that there will be bigger conversation. Just that I do not have the authority to make some disclosures.
In your modeling,
Yeah.
at what price would these interventions be triggered?
Or anything beyond maybe 120,
World price of crude?
maybe.
Okay. Then the interventions will be triggered locally?
The conversations can be firmed up.
Okay. and then that passes on to the consumer. Basically, bottom line, that's what it means, right?
In the past few days, and I think the president has been generally concerned about prices. Greatly concerned. That I can tell you. And so, if there is anything within the rules books on how to mitigate the impact for the average Ghanaian, the president will not hesitate at all. He will not hesitate at all. I mean, his record is there.
Let's, away from the price issues, let's talk about some major policy interventions. I mean, we've talked a lot about price, but that is not the only thing you're doing.
Yeah.
I've noticed that you want to leave a legacy in this particular institution. What for you are the big ticket items in terms of policy intervention that you're pursuing currently to reshape the downstream sector?
There are a lot of interventions, but I think the most important for me is a stronger regulatory agency.
Okay.
Because you see, regulation is at the core of what we do. How do we check that product that ultimately comes to you is of good quality? There's nothing more than cheaper, affordable, but quality fuel. Like we always say, maybe if the thing becomes too cheap, it may have a hidden cost. But we want a situation where you have an industry where you have quality, you have cheap price together. That regulation can give, and it's a firm thing that we're looking at. Two,
how are you attempting to fix that?
Yes.
Strengthen your...
Yes, so already, again, we have a very firm, strong quality assurance department. We want to beef up our labs for the purposes of speed. You can easily check. When you go to the pump, do your mystery shopping, you can easily do that assessment. It's something that we have on it's a big ticket thing for us. Also, to protect the consumer.
Let me ask you a personal question. This is a question I've always wanted to ask any chief executive of NPA. Before you became chief executive,
yes,
we all buy fuel.
Yes.
And there's this thing that there's kill me quick stations. Okay. And we all are avoiding kill me quick. Now that you become chief executive, you see the reality. Yeah. You see the real face of the beast. Are there kill me quick? Where are you buying your fuel? Are you buying your fuel? Can you, because NPA tells us that every fuel that once is credited is fine. Are you now driving to any fuel station you see in town and going to get your fuel, knowing what you now know that I don't know? So
you see, when I was growing, when you talk about fuel station, it was mobile.
Yeah.
I don't know if
then there was Elf.
Yeah.
But mobile was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, mobile was
so
a big one.
For us, I grew up in community where those days it was, I don't know whether they pump it, then you will see it come up, and then I grew up in that kind of environment. Now growing up, I've seen those scenarios. Then today I've seen the use of automation and others. I have, because of my position, I shouldn't be naming specific OMCs, but I have particular OMCs where I kind of go to buy. Maybe
these ones you cultivated recently, or you always had
in fact,
before you came here?
Much earlier before, there was one, a very indigenous, quite old. I don't want to mention his name. Anyway, I'll still go there.
Okay.
I think maybe it's because of brand loyalty.
Okay.
Now, by reason of proximity to home, there's another one that I buy from now.
Okay.
Yes. And usually when I get there, the service attendant, they say, hey, So, I mean, and sometimes I deliberately just go through their washroom just to see
What is happening?
how their washroom and others look
but
like.
Godwin, when you're traveling, just random travel, and this is sometimes you can drive and forget that your fuel gauge is down.
No, but I don't forget.
Well,
you know why? Because there was a day my fuel was almost finished, and I said, imagine my fuel gets and I go and do 1 gallon.
Yeah.
And then somebody takes a picture of me, NPA CEO doing 1 gallon. So now I've advised myself that, you know what, I would always make sure that I have a certain threshold, so that I don't get myself a situation where somebody will take a picture of me and put it online and say, NPA CEO will 1 gallon.
But I guess the point I was making is that if you were driving, would you just stop at any filling station?
I have that.
And just in fact,
I have that confidence.
You have that confidence.
I have that confidence.
In spite of what you've not been exposed to.
Yes, I have that confidence. Okay. I have that confidence.
You're not saying it because you're a chief executive.
Because you see,
you're protecting the industry.
Hold on, because you see, when the product come, there's one way by which they come into the country.
Okay.
Beyond the refineries, and for the refineries, we have our quality people there.
Okay.
Now, once they come and they're on the vessel, before they get discharged, a quality assessment test is conducted. The certification is done, quote unquote, by us.
Okay.
That in itself is a quality assurance to the market.
So the kill me quick is a myth then? Because my friends on my WhatsApp, anytime I mention one part, they say, kill me quick. It's a myth.
You see, I wouldn't want to say it's a myth or it is not. Okay. People lived experience cannot easily be denied. That's their lived experience. But what we have done is that immediately such a thing comes up, immediately alert us.
So that's one of your policy interventions, trying to strengthen
it. I mean, once we get it done. Okay. And also to build a greater stakeholder engagement. Okay. And when I say stakeholder engagement, what I simply mean, they are key stakeholders, Seaboard, COMA, we have the tanker owners unions, we have drivers union. Guess what? You may have products. If the tanker drivers say they are on strike, nothing moves. If the owner of the tanker says, I cannot work, nothing will move. And so you need to build a very good regulatory relationship. At the core of it is consumer protection as well. So it is a cocktail of issues to make the authority stronger. Okay.
Before I wrap up, what is the one thing you want to be remembered for by the time you exit? Everybody must have that.
You know, even in the office here, even among staff, they have different expectations. For staff level, great welfare. Okay. Great welfare. Okay. Great welfare. For the generality of our country to leave a stronger authority, not weakened in terms of its regulatory oversight. Nothing personal.
Will you seek a review of your founding legislation?
Thankfully, the legislation is 20 years last year. Minister Dr. Matthew Poku Prempeh, my predecessor, Alhaji Mustafa, they started the amendment process of the Act. In fact, the bill went through Parliament. It never got approved. My minister has taken it up, the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapor. There are some issues that have been looked at. We're engaging broadly. We are consulting largely to ensure that at least this one will do another 20 years or more.
Okay. That there is Godwin Eduji Tamaklo. Kill me quick.
No kill me quick.
No kill me quick.
No kill me quick.
But all the best.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you. And Evans.
And your prediction, I really hope it comes to pass. Everybody benefits.
I'm very confident
if your analysis holds,
that something good will come out of Nazareth.
Okay. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
And let me say that Ghanaians should be assured we have product in country. We rest assured there's not going to be anything like shortage. we'll manage the pricing issues.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.